A white lawyer marries a black woman. His family doesn't approve, and the tension is palpable from the very beginning. But what happened over the years was something no one could have predicted. What made this family, so opposed at first, end up deeply regretting it? Get ready for a story that will stir your emotions and make you reflect on love, prejudice, and the twists life can take. Don't miss it, because the ending will truly surprise you. Hello my friends, I'm here to ask a huge favor from you. If you enjoy the videos on our channel, I kindly ask you to subscribe and help us reach the milestone of 1,000 subscribers this month. Subscribe and help us make this dream come true. On a sunny afternoon in the heart of Brooklyn, Quentin Hale, a young lawyer with a fearless spirit, found himself casually in a cafe when his eyes met those of Imani Clark. Imani, a passionate and determined arts teacher, was reading a book while savoring her coffee. What began as a simple act of chivalry, offering her a chair, sparked a spontaneous conversation about literature and art that quickly transformed into hours of fluid dialogue and shared laughter. As their meetings became more frequent, Quentin and Imani discovered not only common interests but also a deep connection that transcended their distinct backgrounds. Quentin, coming from a traditionally conservative and privileged family, and Imani, the daughter of Jamaican immigrants who struggled to provide her with a better life, realized that their differences enriched their relationship, bringing new perspectives and mutual learnings. However, not everyone viewed this union favorably. At family dinners and social gatherings, the first signs of disapproval began to emerge. Hesitant glances, whispered comments, and even direct warnings attempted to discourage the relationship. "You are from different worlds," they said, as if love should acknowledge such boundaries. Imani, always with her unwavering grace, faced these challenges with a smile, choosing to see the resistance as an opportunity to educate and open minds. Quentin, in turn, admired her strength and determination more and more. Together, they decided that nothing and no one would define the contours of their love. They chose to fight, they chose to love beyond barriers. This choice led them to moments of true testing, where the strength of their commitment would be challenged repeatedly. However, each obstacle overcome only reinforced the bond between them, preparing them to face the next stages of their journey together. This love story, which started so simply in a cafe, was unaware of the challenges it would face, but Quentin and Imani were ready. They knew that, regardless of what lay ahead, they would face it together, with the strength that only true love can offer. And so, as they planned their wedding, they knew that every step taken was a step toward a future where they could, perhaps, change not only their lives, but also the lives of those around them. The day of Quentin and Imani's wedding dawned radiant, as if the very sky had decided to bless their union with its most beautiful blue and a resplendent sun. However, beneath the surface of this idyllic celebration, currents of tension and controversy swirled. As Imani dressed, surrounded by her bridesmaids helping with the final touches of a stunning gown, she took a deep breath, trying to dissipate the anxiety that plagued her, not out of common nervousness, but from concern about the reactions of some less receptive guests. On Quentin's side, the atmosphere was equally charged. His parents, although present, wore reserved expressions, communicating their support more out of obligation than genuine enthusiasm. Quentin, ever the diplomat, did his best to ensure that his future wife did not perceive the discomfort some of his relatives still felt. As the guests began to gather in the small chapel adorned with wildflowers and ribbons, murmurs and glances traversed the space. Some expressed admiration for the beauty of the ceremony, while others whispered about the unusual couple at the front. However, when Imani began her walk down the aisle to the sound of a soft melody, all voices fell silent. Her presence was so magnificent, so full of grace and confidence, that even the most skeptical could not help but be captivated by the moment. Imani and Quentin exchanged vows with a touching sincerity, promising love and fidelity in the face of all adversities. They not only committed to each other but also challenged the conventions and expectations that sought to define their relationship. The ceremony was a mirror of their journey up to that point, beautiful, challenging, and deeply authentic. After the "I do," as the newlyweds walked back down the aisle, now together, the applause that echoed in the chapel was more than a celebration of a wedding. It was a tacit acknowledgement that something significant had changed that day. Although not everyone, many there began to realize that true love could indeed be stronger than prejudice. And so, amidst smiles and tears, Quentin and Imani stepped out into the world as husband and wife, ready to face whatever lay ahead, sustained by the love that had united them and the courage that had defined them from the very beginning. After the euphoria of the wedding, the reality of daily life began to settle for Quentin and Imani. They moved into a charming house in Brooklyn, where they hoped to start a new life together. However, the cultural and social differences that had once seemed mere challenges during their courtship now revealed themselves as daily obstacles. Imani, with her always positive energy, tried to integrate into the local community, participating in events and social meetings. However, the barriers were palpable. Subtle comments and even disapproving glances were not uncommon when she walked through the streets or entered shops. These small, yet constant, manifestations of prejudice began to weigh on her, though she made an effort not to let Quentin notice. Quentin, for his part, found himself torn between his love for his wife and his desire to belong to his community of origin. He knew that the choices he had made had consequences, but the reality of social isolation and discrimination against his wife was harsher than he had anticipated. On several occasions, he confronted friends and even family members who openly questioned his decision to marry Imani. The couple, however, found strength in each other. On nights when the weight of the world felt unbearable, they sought refuge in the comfort of their home, where they could simply be Quentin and Imani, away from judgmental gazes. At home, they cultivated a small garden, which became a symbol of the love and resilience they shared. Each flower that bloomed was a small victory against the external adversities. But the struggle was not only external. Quentin frequently found himself in heated debates about social justice and equality, topics he now defended with more fervor than ever, inspired by Imani's strength and dignity. He began to use his position as a lawyer to advocate for those who, like his wife, faced daily discrimination. The challenge of living as an interracial couple in Brooklyn was constant, but Quentin and Imani knew that each small step toward acceptance and change was a brick in the construction of a better world. They were not only fighting for themselves, but for future generations who, they hoped, would live in a world where love knew no barriers. As Imani worked hard to build bridges in the Brooklyn community, Quentin found his own battle in the courts, defending causes that many viewed as controversial. His commitment to social justice, while admirable, was not well received by everyone in his professional sphere, leading to conflicts both in the courtroom and outside of it. In a particularly tense case, Quentin defended a group of young people from a marginalized community, unjustly accused of vandalism. The pressure for him to abandon the case was intense, coming from colleagues and even members of the community who saw him as a traitor to his own class. But Quentin, inspired by Imani's resilience and his own sense of justice, stood firm. Imani, for her part, often found herself at social events alongside Quentin, where she was subtly isolated or underestimated by other women in Quentin's social circle. Despite feeling the chill of exclusion, she used these occasions to demonstrate her intelligence and compassion, slowly gaining some unexpected allies. At a charity event, a conversation that Imani had with the wife of a local influential politician changed the course of their social interactions. By sharing her experiences and visions about education and social inclusion, Imani impressed the woman, who promised to help promote educational projects in underserved communities. This new alliance proved to be a turning point for Imani and Quentin, as more people began to see the value that both brought to the community. Quentin, aware of the impact his wife was beginning to have, felt even more motivated in his own struggle, realizing that together, they were starting to make a real difference. Life for the couple in Brooklyn, although still facing challenges, began to show signs of change. Imani's small victories in the community and Quentin's courtroom achievements not only reinforced their love for each other, but also their commitment to transforming their community for the better. Quentin and Imani's life in Brooklyn began to stabilize as they strengthened their home amid external storms. The house they chose and lovingly decorated became a safe refuge, a place where they could be themselves, free from the tensions of the outside world. Here, among walls filled with art and shelves brimming with books, they found peace. The kitchen, in particular, became the heart of the home. Quentin, who had discovered a talent for cooking, often prepared dinners that blended dishes from their respective cultures. These moments at the table were not just for nourishment, but also for strengthening their bond and sharing dreams and challenges. During one of these dinners, Imani shared with Quentin her idea of starting a community art program for youth. She wanted to use her experience as an art teacher to give voice to the marginalized and offer them a space for expression and personal growth. Inspired by Imani's vision and determination, Quentin promised to find ways to fund the project. This initiative brought a new energy to the couple as they worked together to bring it to fruition. Imani dedicated herself to planning the lessons and curating materials, while Quentin used his network to secure local support. Their enthusiasm was contagious, and soon the community began to take interest, seeing art as a bridge for understanding and integration. With each child who participated in the program, each mural painted, and each performance held, Quentin and Imani felt they were contributing to something greater than themselves. It was a way to heal not only the visible wounds of the community, but also those invisible ones brought on by prejudice and exclusion. Thus, amid challenges, Quentin and Imani's home was not just a dwelling, but a living example of how love, art, and determination can transform a space, a community, and above all, each other. They were not merely surviving the storms, they were learning to dance in the rain. Imani had always been a woman of unparalleled strength. From a young age, she learned to face adversity with courage, but it was alongside Quentin that her strength manifested most fully. It wasn't just the determination that drove her, but a deep sense of justice and love that propelled her forward, even in the toughest moments. In the Brooklyn community, Imani began to be seen not just as Quentin's wife, but as a transformative force. The mothers who once looked at her with suspicion now sought her out for advice, admiring the way she handled challenges while still finding time to help others. Gradually, she became a central figure, a pillar of support for many in need of guidance. A clear example of this transformation occurred when the son of a neighbor, known for his rebelliousness, enrolled in Imani's community art program. Reluctant at first, he found in the classes a means to express his anger and frustrations. Imani, with her patience and understanding, helped him channel those emotions into creativity, transforming his life and behavior. But Imani was not only a teacher or a supportive neighbor. She also became a silent mediator in Quentin's relationships with his family. When Quentin's mother fell gravely ill, it was Imani who spent nights by her side, caring for her with the same tenderness she would have for her own mother. This dedication deeply moved the Hale family, who began to see Imani with new eyes, recognizing the value she brought not only to Quentin but to everyone around her. Imani's influence grew not through force or imposition, but through the way she touched people's lives with small gestures of kindness and wisdom. At home, Quentin saw how his wife transformed everything she touched, and he felt more grateful than ever to have such an extraordinary woman by his side. Thus, while Quentin fought his external battles, Imani continued to be the safe harbor, the beacon that illuminated both their paths and those of many others. Together, they were an unstoppable team, but it was Imani, with her quiet strength and generous heart, who often showed the way, reminding everyone that true strength comes from love and compassion. It was on a cloudy afternoon, while Imani tended to the garden she loved so much, that something unexpected happened. Quentin's mother, who had once observed Imani with suspicion, stopped at the gate of the couple's home. Her eyes, once cold, were now filled with something different, a mix of curiosity and reflection. With a slight nod, she requested to enter. Imani, always welcoming, invited her to sit on the porch. The silence between them was thick, but not uncomfortable. It was as if both were waiting for the right moment to speak. Finally, Quentin's mother broke the silence, speaking in a soft voice, yet laden with emotion. She began to share stories from Quentin's childhood, moments Imani had never heard before. Then, hesitantly, she spoke of the challenges of letting go of prejudices she hadn't even realized she held. Throughout that conversation, Imani sensed something was changing. It was not just a matter of acceptance, but of recognition. Quentin's mother was beginning to see Imani not just as her son's wife, but as a woman with her own story, her own struggles, and her own worth. This was the first sign that perhaps the barrier that existed between them was finally dissolving. In the days that followed, small gestures began to occur. Invitations for family dinners became more frequent, and the critical glances of other relatives were replaced by shy smiles and more welcoming conversations. Imani, with her generous nature, returned each gesture with gratitude, aware that these changes, however small, represented a significant step toward true family integration. Quentin, observing all of this, felt a mix of relief and hope. Seeing his family begin to recognize Imani's value was a dream he had nurtured since the beginning of their relationship. And now, watching this transformation unfold before his eyes, he felt more confident that love, when true and persistent, has the power to change even the most hardened hearts. This change, although still in its infancy, brought a new dynamic to Imani and Quentin's life. They knew that the road ahead would still have challenges, but the first step had been taken. And with each gesture of acceptance, they were building, little by little, a bridge between worlds that once seemed irreconcilable. As the months went by, Quentin and Imani found themselves at the center of something much larger than they had imagined. The love they shared, their resilience in the face of adversity, and the way they were changing the perceptions of those around them transformed them into symbols of resistance and hope. In the Brooklyn community, other couples facing prejudice began to draw inspiration from their journey, seeing in Quentin and Imani an example of courage. One day, while walking together in the park, something unexpected happened. A young couple, visibly emotional, approached them. They shared how they had faced harsh looks and hurtful comments for being together, but that, upon witnessing the strength and unity that Quentin and Imani exuded, they felt encouraged to move forward and fight for their love. The simple yet sincere words from that couple deeply touched Quentin and Imani. It was proof that what they were building went beyond their own lives. Imani, who always believed in the power of art to transform hearts and minds, began to incorporate her and Quentin's story into her lessons and the community performances she organized. Young people from all backgrounds began to find in art a way to express their own struggles against prejudice, using colors and forms to tell stories that, otherwise, might never be heard. The murals that emerged throughout the streets of Brooklyn gradually became symbols of a community learning to see beyond appearances. Quentin, for his part, began to be invited to lectures and debates on social justice, human rights, and inclusion. He always mentioned Imani as his greatest source of inspiration, and together, as a couple, they became known for their silent yet powerful fight against the invisible barriers separating people. Quentin Hale's name was now associated not only with great causes in the courtroom but also with the daily struggle for equality and dignity for all. The changes, though slow, began to be felt throughout Brooklyn. The prejudice that had once been deeply rooted began to give way to more open conversations and a genuine curiosity to know one another. And in this process, Quentin and Imani remained steadfast, knowing that every small step was a victory, not just for them, but for the entire community. At home, after long days of work and challenges, they would sit at the table, sharing stories and reminiscing about how far they had come. But both knew that the journey was still far from over. However, the certainty that they were transforming lives, including their own, strengthened them to continue. Within the Hale family, the transformation was as subtle as it was inevitable. The seeds of change planted by Imani were beginning to germinate, even in the most hardened hearts. At first, it was a challenge for many of them to see beyond their own beliefs, but Imani's silent and consistent actions were making it impossible to ignore the power of the love she shared with Quentin. Quentin's father, a man known for his rigidity and strong opinions, began to show signs of an internal struggle. Sitting in his favorite armchair, he often observed Imani in silence during family gatherings. He saw how she attended to the small details, how she genuinely cared for each family member, and how, without saying a word, she earned the respect of those around her. This made him reflect on his own attitudes and prejudices that he had once considered unshakable. One night, after a family dinner, Quentin's father asked to speak with him privately. In a tone Quentin had never heard before, he admitted that for the first time, he was beginning to question the convictions he had carried his whole life. He said that by observing Imani's strength and dignity, he realized that there was something fundamentally wrong with his previous judgments. Quentin, hearing those words, felt a mix of surprise and hope, understanding that the path to full acceptance was long but not impossible. Meanwhile, other family members were also going through their own reflections. Quentin's sister, who had always been reserved regarding Imani, began to seek her out to talk about life, difficulties, and even to ask for advice. Imani, with her usual patience, listened and offered her words with care, creating a connection that had previously seemed unattainable. This gradual yet significant change within the Hale family did not go unnoticed by the Brooklyn community. People began to see that the family, which had once opposed Quentin and Imani's relationship, was now opening up, learning, and growing with Imani's presence. This served as a powerful example for other families facing their own internal struggles with prejudice and differences. Quentin and Imani knew that the battle was not won, but every small gesture, every reflection that emerged, showed that they were on the right path. What had once seemed an insurmountable barrier was beginning to disintegrate, not through imposition, but through the simple and powerful truth of love lived in its purest and most selfless form. And so, as tensions transformed into dialogues, the Hale family began to understand that love could truly change everything. As time passed, the battles Quentin faced in the courts began to intensify. His unwavering convictions to fight for social justice and equality started attracting not only admirers but also powerful opponents. In a high-profile case, Quentin decided to defend a group of workers from a marginalized community exploited by a large corporation. It was a case that, if victorious, would bring justice to many but at the cost of significant personal sacrifices. Imani, always by Quentin's side, knew that this fight was more than just a matter of principles. She understood that for Quentin, every legal battle was also a way to protect and ensure that the world was a fairer place for everyone, including her. However, the weight of this responsibility began to take its toll. Quentin spent sleepless nights immersed in papers and legal strategies, while the veiled threats and external pressures mounted. The accumulated stress began to affect Quentin in subtle yet noticeable ways. His smile, once so easy and frequent, became rarer, and the light-hearted conversations at home were increasingly replaced by worried silences. Imani, sensing this change, decided to be more than a silent support. She began to actively participate, not just caring for Quentin, but also contributing her own ideas and strategies, bringing a unique perspective that often eluded Quentin. In one of those tense moments, Quentin was called into the office of the head of the law firm where he worked. The conversation was straightforward: he should withdraw from the case or face serious consequences in his career. The pressure was immense, and Quentin knew that retreating would mean betraying his principles, but continuing could mean the end of his professional trajectory. It was then that Imani, with her serene strength, reminded Quentin why they had embarked on this journey together. She spoke about the importance of fighting for what is right, even when the odds are against you, and how each small victory could mean real change for those who needed it most. Imani's words reignited the flame in Quentin, reminding him that his fight was bigger than himself, greater than any threat. Determined, Quentin chose to move forward with the case, fully aware that the cost would be high. And as he faced the court battles, Imani continued to be his safe haven, his partner on all fronts. Together, they faced adversities, knowing that despite the consequences, they were fighting for what truly mattered: justice and dignity for every human being. And so, even in the face of difficulties, they remained steadfast, united by the greater purpose that had always guided them. Quentin's decision to proceed with the case against the corporation had immediate repercussions. The day after a favorable verdict, which represented a monumental victory for the exploited workers, Quentin received a letter from the law firm where he had built his career. In a few cold and formal words, he was informed that his position had become untenable, and that it would be best for both parties if he left. The career he had worked so hard to build was at risk, but Quentin did not regret his choices. When Quentin told Imani about the letter, she listened in silence, feeling the weight of disappointment in his voice. But instead of despair, Imani saw in that moment an opportunity for transformation. She knew that Quentin's courage, which had brought him this far, would continue to guide him toward new possibilities. And it was she who suggested that perhaps this was the moment for Quentin to free himself from the shackles of his old job and create something of his own, something that reflected his values and ideals. With Imani's unwavering support, Quentin decided to start his own law firm, dedicated to social causes and the defense of human rights. They knew the journey would be arduous, but together they began to build what would quickly become a refuge for those without a voice. The small office, initially modest, soon became known for its dedication and integrity, attracting cases that not only challenged the system but also inspired real change. Meanwhile, Quentin's family, who had once been resistant to his relationship with Imani, now saw the positive impact she was having on his life and the community. Quentin's mother, in particular, came to deeply respect Imani's strength and wisdom. During a family dinner, which would have previously been tense and uncomfortable, she stood up to speak and, with a sincerity that moved everyone, apologized to Imani for all the doubts and resistance she had harbored in the past. It was a moment of redemption, where old wounds began to heal. Imani, with her characteristic generosity, accepted the apology with a warm smile, recognizing that this act of humility was more than a mere gesture. It was a step toward healing and full acceptance. From that day on, the Hale family became more united, and Imani, who had once been seen as a stranger, was truly recognized as an integral part of that family. For Quentin, that moment of familial redemption not only solidified the strength of his relationship with Imani, but also reminded him that the fight for justice and equality was not just in the courtroom. It was also at home, in every interaction, in every gesture of understanding and acceptance. And so, while the new office flourished, Quentin and Imani's personal lives reached a peace and harmony that they had always known was possible but could now finally live fully. The story of Quentin and Imani culminated in a way that neither of them could have predicted. Over time, what began as a struggle against prejudice and invisible barriers became a powerful narrative that inspired not only the Brooklyn community but also people from distant places who heard about their journey. Quentin, now at the helm of his own law firm, and Imani, a transformative force through art and education, were creating a legacy that would echo for a long time. Brooklyn, once a city divided by deep-rooted prejudices, began to change in profound and meaningful ways. The example set by Quentin and Imani spread like wildfire, awakening something in the people. Couples who once had now walked hand in hand down the streets, families that had been separated by hate began to reunite, and the invisible walls that once divided entire communities started to crumble. On a sunny afternoon, the Brooklyn community organized a special event in the Central Park. It was a celebration, not only of Quentin's victory in court or Imani's community projects, but also of the transformative power of love and acceptance. The event was marked by heartfelt speeches, artistic performances, and above all, by the presence of people who once stood on opposite sides, but now united in a single voice of hope and renewal. During the event, Quentin and Imani were invited to the stage. Hand in hand, they walked to the center, where they were met with warm applause. When silence fell, Quentin, his voice choked with emotion, spoke about the journey they had taken together, the challenges, the pains, but also the joys and victories they had achieved. He thanked everyone for believing that change was possible and reminded them that, although much had been done, there was still much to be achieved. Imani, in turn, spoke about the power of community and the importance of each individual in building a better world. She recalled how small acts of kindness and understanding had paved the way to where they were now, and how each person present had the power to continue this journey of transformation. Her words, filled with emotion and truth, resonated in the hearts of everyone present, reinforcing the bond that now united Brooklyn. As the event came to an end and the crowd began to disperse, Quentin and Imani remained on stage for a moment, watching the sunset over Brooklyn. There, under the golden light that bathed the city, they felt a profound peace, a sense of mission accomplished. But they knew that, despite all the achievements, true change was just beginning. And together, ready for whatever came next, they continued to walk side by side into a future where love and acceptance would be the most powerful forces of all. And so we come to the end of this inspiring story of Quentin and Imani. But now, the question remains, what about you? Are you willing to face the challenges and barriers that life puts in your way to live the life you truly desire? Are you prepared to fight for what is right, even when it seems impossible? Like Quentin and Imani, are you ready to transform not only your life, but also the lives of those around you? Think about it. How many times have you held back from following your heart out of fear of judgment from others? How many times have you backed down in the face of an obstacle that seemed too big? Perhaps it's time to change that. Maybe it's time to take the first step toward the life you've always dreamed of, regardless of what others might think or say. If this story has touched you in any way, I invite you to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications. Here, you will find more stories that not only inspire, but also challenge you to be the best version of yourself. And before you go, take a look at the videos on the screen now. I'm sure they will also move you and motivate you to continue this journey of personal transformation. Let's go together, because your future starts now.